Hello and welcome to this stock analysis update for British American Tobacco. I'm doing this update for British American Tobacco because they just did their annual report for 2022 last week. So if you're particularly interested in them, then take a look at the video I did 3 months ago where I really do go into a lot of detail. But this video is going to just be an update based upon their latest annual report release. Before I start, please remember that I do these videos just as a hobby and always speak to a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decisions. So BAT are the world's largest tobacco company, and would you believe it if I told you that 19% of the world's population smokes? At their current share price, they pay a really nice 7.5% dividend yield. So they split their business into these four regions, and as we can see, a large amount, 46% of their revenues are from the US, with Europe and North Africa about 23%, and then the rest is split between the Asia Pacific and Middle East and Americas and Sub-Saharan Africa. We can see that the vast majority of their revenues comes from people smoking cigarettes. And the long-standing worry I have about BAT is, are they going to be able to increase their sales, particularly from vaping, so that they can completely reduce their reliance on people smoking before they have their Kodak moment? So I've took the data from last week's annual report for 2022, and first of all, looking at revenue growth, we see that actually, even though they sold 5% less cigarettes, they actually made an increase in revenues of 5% from their sale of cigarettes. So they've managed to make more money by charging more per fag packet. We see that the revenues have increased enormously for vaping and thermal heat products, and also these buccal chews. I'm not totally sure if we can rely on this breakneck increases in their vaping and thermal heat product revenues. So I like to use the actual volume growth for a better idea of how things are going in each region. The first thing that's really interesting in the Americas and Sub-Saharan African and the Asian Pacific and Middle East areas, there's still just as many people smoking. We do not see a decline in the numbers of people smoking. Whereas in contrast, in the US and Europe and North Africa areas, we see quite frightening declines. 15% decline in the US and 10% decline in Europe. So I can't offer any explanation to why we see this difference in between these different areas, but that's quite remarkable nonetheless. We see that the reductions in volume of people smoking in the US and Europe is quite frightening. It's 15% in the US, 10% in Europe. Now, we have to remember that this isn't actually the number of people smoking, it's the number of cartons of cigarettes wholesalers have bought from BAT. And in their shareholder presentation they did last week, now if you go on the BAT website, you can watch their investor presentation they gave last week. In that call, they explained that these huge losses, this huge reduction in volume in the US and Europe was mainly down to the unwinding of stock, which I think might be something to do with stockpiling that happened over the supply chain crisis. But certainly it's at least a continuation of the 2021 numbers. We clearly see a bit of a worrying downtrend in the number of people buying cigarettes in these areas, even if up to now they are able to actually still make more money by charging more for the cigarettes. It's interesting to see the differences in smoking habits in the different areas. So in the US, the main thing is that snuff is actually a thing in the US, and this makes a nice contribution. And there, people are switching from smoking to vaping. In the Americas, there's only really vaping, whereas in the Asia Pacific and Middle East, it seems that people aren't really into vaping, but they are into thermal heat products. I understand that Japan is particularly strong for this. And then in Europe, we have a bit of a mix of everything, and also quite uniquely these chews that people like as well. So yeah, it's interesting to see the differences in smoking habits in the different areas. But generally, the negative thing for me is if you look at the growth in volume in these areas, and here you can see actually, so in the US, for example, we have this amazing plus 67% number in 2021, but that's because they were still rolling it out. And then as it gets more established, now we see it decreasing, and it does worry me. Are they going to be able to keep? It does worry me that even at say 10% growth, are they going to? That's only a small fraction of this piece of the pie. And then, so even with compounding, are they really going to be able to catch up with the combustibles before the company has its Kodak moment if you get a certain critical mass where everyone starts vaping? And it's the same if you look at the individual numbers here for Europe, Asia and the Middle East, where it's all thermal heat products, and Americas and Sub-Saharan Africa. They're kind of fairly impressive numbers in people vaping or using, in terms of the increase in people using vaping or thermal heat products. But my worry is overall, is it enough really to close the gap before this company gets its Kodak moment? Looking just at the vaping, we see that there is definitely a consistent trend, and so as a bare minimum, I'm going to be keeping a close eye on this data in future reports because I want to see this trend continue. Because the moment it starts flattening off, I think that could be a sign of trouble. Exactly the same with the tobacco heating products and with the modern oil products. And when we look at the combustible products, we see here this decline of about 2% continuing. Actually, when I look at this, though, there is a positive thing. So, let's say these things do start to level off. There is also another aspect to consider, and that is you will get people who never will quit smoking. They're going to continue smoking the rest of their lives. So you might get kind of a situation in the future, although the number of people smoking does decrease, there's still going to be the die-hard older smokers who just keep on smoking until the day they die. Also, when you look at YouTube videos or TV programs that have young people in them, or if you just go out to your local bar and have a look around, there are still a lot of young people who choose to start smoking even now. So it could be that the number of people smoking does actually kind of bottom out and just reach a level where it starts to decline a lot more slowly. Once you're left with the diehards and the new people coming into smoking because they think it's cool. And also, perhaps, also I should add, perhaps, people who smoke cannabis because it's been legalized in the US and everyone thinks it's cool. They use tobacco products when they smoke joints, and then that probably gets them into smoking as well. So you can't just assume that they are going to have a Kodak moment, I guess is what I'm saying. This could start leveling off. But certainly from a conservative investment perspective, I'm going to assume that it is going to continue to decline at these rates. So looking at the numbers, which I've updated from last week's report, they increased revenues by 8%. And we see this beautiful trend here of increasing revenues over a long period of time. We have this anomaly here of the Reynolds takeover, but certainly from here again, we see the operating profit and the net income increasing, increasing nice and steadily. The net income was down 2% though in 2022, but you've got to realise that that included a 0.6 million impairment because of the Russian write-offs, and then a zero point 0.8 billion in restructuring. So really, when you consider that, they've been doing really well. I'd focused quite a bit on the FX effects in my last video, and generally, and if the US dollar is getting stronger against the pound sterling, that's good for this company. Whereas if the dollar's weakening, that's bad. But when I compare the 8% headwind they had in 2021 with the 8% tailwind they had in 2022, it seems that actually, although you have to live with these FX effects, they only make the net income flap around by 1 billion one way or the other each year. So in the overall scheme of things, the FX the FX effects aren't really that big a consideration for me. And actually, in the longer run, I think it's only a good thing for BAT because the US is a net energy exporter, whereas the UK is now an energy importer because our governments have failed to allow proper investment in hydrocarbons. I'm actually liking this FX aspect. I mean, like I said, it's only going to flap things around by a billion either way every year, but comparing the UK as an economy to the US as an economy, and the differences in their hydrocarbon reserves over like a decade period, I think the FX effects could be quite a boon actually for BAT shareholders. Here's a net income history in a graphical form, and you see after the Reynolds takeover anomaly here, we have them behaving exactly how you want to see a defensive stock behave in a stagflationary environment. We see income increasing, expenditure increasing in lockstep, and a real nice safe net income. You just see how nice and flat, or you could say steadily, or you could see gradually increasing their net income is. It really does look quite impressive. And I visualize this data here like a rhino steadily plodding along slowly. It doesn't matter what you throw at them, they just keep on with their gradual progress. And I do find this very impressive. It's exactly the kind of steady ship you want in the kind of environment we're in at the moment. Looking at their assets, and again, after the Reynolds takeover, which obviously changed the company quite a bit, we see complete consistency here in the signature of their assets and debts. The only thing that's really notable is their net assets have increased quite a bit. Because this is just an update video, I haven't gone into depth to pinpoint exactly where. My speculation is it might be to do with their new vaping brands and thermal heat brands that they're putting up. These brands could well be the Marlboros of the future. So that's how I explain maybe why their net assets have gone up. It is notable their debts at 39 million. One thing I don't like about them is their debt situation. So I've got here their market cap versus value, and we see that they're much cheaper. They're more cheaply valued now than they were when I first bought them. You see how their market cap has now disappeared behind their net assets, which are slowly increasing. So on this, they look very nicely priced. The only thing, like I said before, though, is I don't really like the debt. You can see here how impressive that despite the reduction in people smoking now year after year, their revenues from people smoking is fairly flat. And you see how the growth is coming in from the new categories. You also see, however, the gulf between the revenues from combustibles and the new categories. And here you clearly see how a lot of their growth has been in the US market. So back to their annual report, and I've just highlighted a few things. One is their operating cash flow conversion is now 100%. So they are in good financial health. They're going to reduce their number of regions from 4 to 3, and they're actually going to selectively exit 30 markets. So they are actually going to start selling off some of their cigarette assets in order to increase profitability. I guess that means they're going to kind of cheat a bit in terms of closing the gap between the vaping revenues and the combustibles by selling off some of the combustibles. So I kind of don't like the kind of cheating, but then actually maybe it's good as a shareholder because they'll only be left with the more profitable areas of the combustibles. So their 100% operating cash conversion was 10% above their guidance, which had been 90%. So they are they are kind of a picture of financial health in terms of their operating cash flow. I guess it's just a shame about that 40 billion of debt. On that topic, though, they really did they really did highlight that their new priority is going to be less about the share buybacks and more about strengthening the balance sheet. So that is great news. They're only going to be increasing their dividend. They actually gave it a 6% increase for 2022. So they have a nice safe. So that 7.5% dividend is really nice and safe. So they touched on their CBD projects. They bought a large part of the company Organigram, of the Canadian company Organigram, who sell cannabis-related products, particularly CBD products. And they also mentioned their K-Bio holdings. Now, if you go back to the last video I did, I go into that in a lot of detail, but it does kind of frustrate me a bit that we have these potential areas for future growth, but I never really see that they're going full in with those. And then I picked out this interesting bit about their joint ventures. So when I look at their income statement, you see that they raised zero point 0.4 billion from joint ventures. And then here in the report, we find out that it's mainly because of this company they've formed in India. Now, I think it's great that they've got a cigarette business in India because I'm really big on India at the moment. I think India is going to actually overtake China. It's got amazing demographics. It's got amazing progress there, and also it's a democracy. So I'm really big on China. I think it's great that they're there, and that accounted for zero point 0.4 billion of their income this year. But then the interesting thing is, you see that actually that organogram project, and then I'm guessing also then the K-Bio project, they are also linked to this joint ventures. So actually, we could see from the Indian partnership, as India prospects, this joint ventures income becoming a bit more substantial. And then also, if organogram becomes successful with selling CBD products, again, that could be a nice little earner here, which would again offer a new income, which would help supplement the combustibles problem. It does kind of frustrate me though, because we keep seeing them tease us with this talk about CBD, but they only really tease us. I want to see BAT CBD products in the gas station and in the newsagents alongside the Views products. So it's kind of a bit frustrating that they keep on teasing it, but I just don't see it being rolled out in a big way. So that really completes all the stuff I wanted to go through just for this update. The actual financial data this company is producing really is exemplary. I mean, I'm so impressed. They look like the perfect defensive stock to be buying in a stagflationary era. Of course, you've also got to then weigh that against the weigh that against a particular situation where we worry about people stopping smoking and moving to vaping, and can British American Tobacco really close the gap before they have their Kodak moment? So for me personally, I'm fairly unambivalent towards British American Tobacco. I bought them at the start of last year. I'm now treading water a bit, but I'm sticking to the stop losses I put in place. The share price dropped quite a bit, and in anticipation of their full year report, and then we had this massive drop when the report was released. It'd be interesting to see if that was some kind of tree shake or something, or if the market really doesn't like them. I can't really understand why we saw that behaviour based on the research I've done in them, which I've shared with you in this video. So for me, it's nice and easy. If my stop loss gets breached again and I'm around to see it happen, then I will be selling half, and then I'll sell half again at this 30% drop loss. I set those stop losses when their share price was a bit higher, so actually the worst one there is only a 20%. It's only roughly a 20% from my original purchase price. But that's it. I kind of sort of don't care either way. The raw numbers look incredible to me, but then I'm balancing that against, are they going to be able to increase their vaping revenues in time? So that's why overall I'm kind of fairly neutral on them and quite happily holding them and taking in the really nice dividends. And let's see what happens the rest of this year. So again, please remember I do these videos just for fun, and speak to your financial advisor before making any investment decisions yourself. I hope you enjoyed this update on British American Tobacco, and have a good week.
Please read the disclaimer and remember that prices can go down as well as up.